You're streaming CBS News Bay Area.
Right now, crowds have gathered in San Francisco as they join thousands of protests across the country this afternoon. This is the second nationwide mass demonstration against the Trump administration in the first 9 months of his second term. Good afternoon. This is special coverage of the No Kings rallies coming to you on CBS News Bay Area. We're live at the studios here in the city. Dozens of events are taking place locally, all with the goal of expressing their dissatisfaction, to say the least, with the Trump administration. Chopper 5 has been up most of the day. It's a live look over the protest in San Francisco. As you can see, many people are out. People here began the march from Sue Bierman Park a little after 1 o'clock this afternoon. That's pretty much across from the Ferry Building on the Embarcadero. They're headed towards Civic Center Plaza, march of about 2 miles from them. Somewhere down there, Da Lin, who has been following this all day. Da?
Who is a force to be reckoned with?
Yeah, Brian, so we are at the corner of Drum and Market Street right now, downtown San Francisco. A large crowd here, the No Kings rally. They are about to march from the Ferry Building all the way to San Francisco City Hall, Civic Center Plaza, basically. And we are among hundreds of people. It's hard for us to tell. You probably have a better vantage point from the chopper, but from where I'm standing, we are among a sea of people. I'm assuming there are definitely hundreds of people, perhaps even thousands of people right now. We saw a lot of signs, perhaps you can see right here, democracy over tyranny. Basically, there's no kings. Their protesters are saying no dictators, no tyrants. They're very upset with the first 10 months of Trump's second term here in the White House. A lot of folks are pretty much upset with all policies, but they focused on a couple of things in recent weeks. They're saying one big issue is the immigration policy. They're very much upset about that. They're also upset about the threat of sending National Guard to San Francisco. Now, we are live on Channel 5 News. I'm curious, why are you here? You're among the many protesters here. What are some of the issues?
A lot of stuff.
What are some of the main things?
Education, the environment, immigration. I can't even think of them all.
In the first 10 months, how do you feel about his policies? How do you feel?
I think every one of his policies is wrong, mean-spirited, and it should be shut down.
Yeah, a lot of folks feel the same way as this gentleman as well. They're very upset with his policies, saying that Mr. Trump has taken America back, not forward. Now, they're set to march here any minute now. Again, a big crowd from Drum and Market all the way down to the Ferry Building. Like I said, hundreds, if not thousands of people here are getting to march any second now. For now, live here in downtown San Francisco. I'll send it back to you, Brian.
All righty, Da Lin in San Francisco. And as we go back to a live look at the chopper, I just wanted to mention that because these are protests and obviously feelings are running high, that there was a T-shirt in the background, for instance, with a vulgar word on it. We apologize for that, but it's a live news event, and that will happen. Thousands have gathered in the plaza. When this happened back in June in San Francisco, about 140,000 people came out. Those at least were the estimates. Today looks like a pretty good-sized crowd as well. They all started at Sue Bierman Park, which is across from the Ferry Building, and we're looking up Market Street from the Ferry Building to the Waterfront Building, and the crowd streaming towards Civic Center Plaza. A walk and a march of about 2.3 miles that will take them down there for what you just heard, which is Da Lin competing with whoever was making a speech at the moment. So it's at the moment, by the way, from coast to coast, it seems like while many people have turned out from small venues to large cities, about 2,500 protest gatherings in all, there has been no violence. In certain places, like in Texas, Governor Abbott concerned about the National Guard being deployed in Austin, Texas, making sure in that state that no trouble erupts. So far, we have no reports of any trouble at all. Began this morning at Times Square in New York at about 9 in the morning on the East Coast and has spread to the West Coast. Hundreds of thousands, millions, in fact, coming out to express their unhappiness in what is being characterized as a left-leaning group. The No Kings organizers coming out for the second time this year, 9 months into Trump's administration, to talk about how unhappy they are with the way things are going. Trump, for his part, by the way, is spending the day at his Mar-a-Lago home, where tonight he'll be hosting a $1 million a plate MAGA fundraiser. In the meantime, you're seeing the crowds that are gathered plenty of them out on Market Street right now. Muni has said in San Francisco that they're obviously going to be deploying traffic around these gatherings. So that's how it looks in San Francisco. And I'm assuming that we're getting ready at least to go to Oakland. Is Kevin Coe still unwell? Here you can see the look at the No Kings protests in Oakland. Things got started there just after noon today. Protesters marched to Lake Merritt. You can see the large crowds gathered there. Covering all of this is Kevin Coe. He is live in Oakland, this march ending up at Lake Merritt, and I'm assuming that's where he is, but I'm not sure. Kevin?
Yeah, well, you got it right. We are here at Lake Merritt, the amphitheater specifically. As you can hear around me, a very, very loud, and I could tell you, a large crowd as well. Organizers here tell me more than 10,000 people. That is their estimation for how many protesters are at today's No Kings March. And I got to tell you, I was here at the No Kings rally / protest in June as well. I can see it. Organizers say they can see it through their data as well. There are far more people here today than in June. I want to give you a quick live look around me right now. As you can see, there are speakers up on stage with, as we said, thousands of people currently sitting here at the Lake Merritt Amphitheater. This actually was an earlier march than other events. As you mentioned, there are events not happening just here in the Bay Area, but across the country as well, all happening at different times. This one here in Oakland started at Wilma Chan Park at around 11:30 a.m., and that march came all the way here. You have to keep in mind the No Kings rally, a little different than the one in June where marchers went to City Hall. We also did have a chance to speak with a couple of speakers that were here earlier today. It was really quick, but I want to show you just how big this crowd is while I continue talking to you. Mayor Barbara Lee was here. Congresswoman Simon was here as well. You'll hear from them coming up later on in our coverage. But I just want you to take a look around Lake Merritt and kind of get an idea, a sense of what it looks around here. There are a lot of tables, different vendors with different social groups and political groups as well, and also just people selling food and snacks of the like, because this is seen as a community event as well. We've talked a lot about safety. There are hundreds of safety ambassadors here in yellow vests and also in bicycles and helmets, making sure everything was okay. And we can report to you right now, everything has been that way so far. Brian?
Alrighty, that's Kevin Coe reporting from Lake Merritt over in Oakland, where, as he pointed out, 10,000 people marched back in June. But for today, Kevin says that there's an even bigger crowd. Could be true in San Francisco as well, where last June, 140,000 showed up. Right now, as we look live at Market Street, and thousands of people gathered there. San Francisco city officials said yesterday that they expect the protest to be largely peaceful, like the June event. So far it is. March anticipated to bring thousands onto Market Street. I do have to point out, back in June, the only incident, and it was a tragic one, a 69-year-old marcher was run over by a Tesla during that No Kings protest. So far today, everything seems to be fine. But ahead of the protest, the city's Department of Emergency Management said that it is closely monitoring 911 call volume. And Muni has said that they're going to coordinate transit reroutes through the city, and that's going to impact multiple lines, of course. Mayor Lurie yesterday, for his part, said that he wanted to be very clear. They will always protect the right to free speech and peaceful protest. But he said, we'll not tolerate any violent or destructive behavior. And so far, none of that has been seen in the Bay Area, or as far as we know and as far as we've heard, it's all been peaceful from coast to coast. And as you're seeing here, along the Embarcadero in San Francisco at Sue Bierman Park, that's the way it's playing out in San Francisco right now. We'll be back with more live coverage of the No Kings protests in the Bay Area when we come back. And welcome back to CBS News Bay Area and our live coverage of the No Kings protests across the Bay. This was earlier this morning along Ocean Beach in San Francisco, right off of what used to be the Great Highway. Protesters forming two messages: No Kings, and yes on 50, the ballot measure to redistrict California's congressional seats so that they heavily favor Democrats. Now it's time to welcome Caroline Heldman. She's professor of political science at Occidental College. And Dr. Heldman, President Trump himself said on Fox yesterday, "I am not a king." This is the second well-attended coast-to-coast protest. First of all, thank you for joining us on your Saturday. I'm sure you had other things to do today, so we appreciate your time. What's your assessment of how the previous marches have affected anything, and if the organizers expect this protest to have any kind of influence?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the organizers have been really forthright in what they want to accomplish here, right? Which is to keep pressure on the Trump administration. These protests are being motivated by the unpopular policies of Donald Trump, right? He's underwater overall, but his policies are even more unpopular than he is now, just 6 months into his presidency, whether it's, the majority of people who stand against the ICE raids and how ICE is conducting itself, to the 72% of Americans who think tariffs will harm the economy, to the 95% of Americans who believe that birthright citizenship should not be overturned. Trump is in a position where, again, 6 months into his presidency, wildly unpopular. And when people don't have political power, they often will take to the streets or engage in boycotts or extra political activity in order to have their voices heard. And that's a really long way of saying that's what's happening today. This is the second big protest, probably going to be the biggest protest in U.S. history. We'll wait to see on that. But it's very clear that they're trying to send a message to the Trump administration about his wildly unpopular, some of them, policies.
I would just suggest that the previous protest, and who knows what the outcome of this one is going to be, that it meets with a mute reception from the White House. I mean, is that your assessment?
Well, this is certainly getting under their skin, I would say, in the White House more than the first protest. And you're pointing out the one in June. 5 million people turned out, and that was the largest protest in U.S. history. Just for a little context, 2017 had about 3.5 million people showing up for the Women's March to protest Trump's first inauguration. This, again, slated to be even bigger than either of those. The White House and other political Republican leaders have been talking about this as, a Hate America protest and that sort of thing. So they're talking about it more than the first protest, which does, the fact maybe that it's sustained engagement and not a one-off is something that they might be seeing as a potential threat to their messaging.
Dr. Heldman, going in lockstep with protests in general against Trump administration policies is also the Prop 50, the proposition that California is trying to counter what they did in Texas to add 5 seats by gerrymandering districts in our state. And the folks out today who were pushing yes on 50 as part of this protest. What is your take on that? Opponents would say it's the two wrongs make a right, that they're so against what they're doing in Texas that we might as well do it here.
Well, and that's certainly a critique I'm hearing from some of my Democratic friends. Other Democratic friends are saying this is what is necessary in order to protect against the anti-democratic measures that are happening in Texas and some other states in order to maintain I would argue, an anti-democratic control of Congress. I wish every single state had the Citizen Commission that Arnold Schwarzenegger put in almost a decade ago. Our democracy would just be so much stronger. I have a lot of Republican friends who are saying, look, this is hypocrisy. You worked hard, right, in the state of California, it was Democrat-led, to make sure that we had this Citizen Commission. Again, I said Democratic-led, but it really spearheaded by Arnold Schwarzenegger, but passed by Democrats. And yeah, there's something to that, right? So the question is, do we sacrifice in the state of California stronger democracy for a short-term political gain nationally? And it's very clear that Governor Newsom really wants to play out on the national stage with this.
Well, you're saying stronger democracy, but in fact, Republicans are already disproportionately not represented in California when you look at sheer numbers. And so this is going to further disenfranchise folks in conservative communities. So again, this is the critics' argument that folks who are often talking about threats to democracy in the United States are now threatening it in California.
Oh, 100%. There's the hypocrisy, right? And as I was saying, I would love every state to have a citizen commission that is bipartisan so that gerrymandering and the drawing of districts that happens every 10 years based on the census is not done in a partisan fashion. So this is a short-term loss of democracy in California for what is being argued is a longer-term gain for democracy for our country. But you're right. I mean, Californians, it will further disenfranchise conservatives in California, just as liberals and Democrats are being disenfranchised in other states that have heavily gerrymandered their districts. So it's, yeah, two wrongs. Do they make a right? I guess the question, we also have a Supreme Court case right now, and you didn't ask about this, so I'm sort of going down a rabbit hole, but it is possible that the Democrats will pretty much be locked out of the legislative branch at the national level if that case goes through and that the gerrymandering is allowed to happen in a partisan fashion without concern about race across the United States. So really big questions about democracy, and of course, Prop 50 being the one that is facing us right now in California.
We're looking live right now at Market Street and the tens of thousands of people who have gathered to march from Sue Bierman Park by the Ferry Building all the way up to Civic Center Plaza in a day of protest. I'm not quite sure how much longer I have with you, but I'll take you as long as you've got. What is your assessment, by the way? You'd mentioned the Supreme Court. What's your assessment in terms of how they have been performing as opposed to expectation? Have they surprised you with some of their less conservative decisions? Or do you think they're just doing what a conservative court would do?
They are doing something we've never seen in the U.S. context. As a scholar of the courts, looking at it for 250 years, they have essentially disregarded a lot of major precedents in order to reshape the country and the government in a more conservative image. And what this means is, for example, like I do expect that the final kind of nail in the coffin of the Voting Rights Act that was passed in 1965 will be hammered in by this court, and they are extending a tradition of overturning some of the principles that we hold very dearly. Some people, of course, assuming that reproductive rights were a core part of the Constitution, and that being overturned without regard for precedents. We do see a lot of precedents getting overturned. And I will say, as somebody who teaches this, we used to say that the courts would expand a precedence or they would narrow a precedence. We now have to say, well, for the first time in U.S. history, they're actually reversing or completely disregarding precedents in a very public way. So, and I'll just add, the court is doing what Donald Trump is doing in many regards, of going against public opinion for a lot of these decisions. So the court is wildly out of step with public opinion on major decisions, for example, reproductive rights. Let's see whether or not, they are called to check if there's a shift in terms of power at the federal level, the legislative level. I do expect the Democrats to take the House in the next midterm elections. Let's see if that has any sort of brakes or effect on the court being so out of step with public opinion.
Understood. And so far, with what you've seen in the protests that began in New York and now are on the West Coast, any observations about the protests? To me, they seem fairly peaceful, emphatic, and vocal.
Yeah, it's what I would expect from, millions of housewives and electricians and middle Americans coming out to protest. What I do think is remarkable, though, about this particular protest and the one in June is not only the size, but the fact that it's happening in urban and rural areas is very interesting to me. It does mean that Indivisible and the organizers are able to mobilize people in all walks of life throughout the United States. And I bring this up because, as these protests are being painted as being anti-American or Antifa protests, I mean, I'm sure Antifa is an ideology. I'm sure there's a lot of anti-fascists in these groups, but they're not violent because they're just like run-of-the-mill, probably mostly mainstream Democrats getting out to the streets and protesting when they feel that they are otherwise locked out of having a voice in government.
Caroline Heldman, political science professor out of Occidental College. Caroline, I really appreciate it. We'll let you get back to your regularly scheduled Saturday. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
And we'll close out this segment by looking at the protesters who are gathered in San Francisco, thousands of them turning out, heading up Market Street. And CBS News Bay Area will continue with its live coverage of the No Kings protests here in San Francisco and in San Jose and in Pleasanton and in Oakland and up in Marin County when we come back. And welcome back to CBS News Bay Area coverage of the No Kings protests in the Bay Area. is along Market Street right now, where protesters gathered about midday today at Sue Bierman Park and headed up Market Street, about a 2.3-mile hike up to Civic Center Plaza, where speeches will be taking place throughout the day, all in opposition to the Trump administration. For his part, the president said last night on Fox, "I am not a king." The Speaker of the House said that this is not a No Kings protest, it's an I Hate America protest. The dissidents themselves are saying it's because they love America that they have all shown up today to carry placards expressing their unhappiness, and that's putting it mildly, with the Trump administration. You see the Ferry Building in the foreground and swinging around to see the corner of Market Street in the Embarcadero in the foreground. Not just San Francisco, of course. There are about 50 gatherings planned Bay-wide. Protesters in the South Bay gathered at St. James Park. There were about 16 different intersections on El Camino Real from Sunnyvale to Palo Alto where folks were holding their signs. Going out to the East Bay, a look at protests in Walnut Creek. Volunteers say that thousands have shown up there along Broadway Plaza.
So it's just showing how we feel, that we want a new administration, that we want Trump gone because to me, he's a criminal. Well, we just are showing our numbers to show that there's a lot of people that feel the same way as I do.
As we look live at the protesters gathered in San Francisco, we'll be back with more live coverage of coast-to-coast protests today on this Saturday, October 18th, when we come back.
You're streaming CBS News Bay Area.
And welcome back on this national day of what its organizers are calling a No Kings protest. There are about 50 different gatherings in different parts of the Bay Area. And you are looking at San Francisco along Market Street, right above, as we head up the more than 100,000, probably. That's my own estimate based on the fact that in June there were 140,000. And Dahlin, who was live down there, said it seems like there are more people out today than there were back in June, as tens of thousands turn out. And Daw is down there. Amongst them, Daw, what's the latest?
Yeah, just a sea of people, as you mentioned, Brian. A lot of folks marching down here on Market Street. This is a massive show of resistance to the Trump administration, with thousands and thousands of demonstrators going from the Ferry Building all the way to Civic Center Plaza, basically in front of City Hall. They have a main stage there set up in front of the Bill Graham Auditorium where speakers will give speeches. But right now, you're looking at the middle of the pack here in terms of just the amount of protesters going down. We're talking about folks from all walks of life. We have families here with young children. We have seniors. We have folks, from every different profession you can imagine. They're all here. They're saying they don't want kings. They don't want dictators, in their words, and they're very upset and angry with the first 10 months of Trump's second administration. Now, these folks, they have a lot of signs. Some of them say that resist. Some of them say no dictatorship. Some of them asking for democracy. I'm going to pull someone out here really quickly. Miss, we are live on KPIX5. Tell us, why are you marching here today? What are some of the issues that you are marching for?
Well, I'm marching because I need to stop the process toward fascism that we are embroiled in this country. And it's judges like Judge Immergut, the lower court judges who are standing up to Trump, who are going to save us.
Emotionally, how do you feel about the first 10 months?
Oh, well, I'm 72, and I've lived in a democracy my whole life. And I never thought it would be possible for it to be destroyed in such a short period of time, but it is. But I am so uplifted by these people here. I think we're going to be able to resist it.
Thank you very much. Yeah, a lot of folks saying very similar things. They feel like the country is going backward instead of forward, like what she was saying, that talked to a lot of seniors. I talked to one lady who was 80 years old. She says, I never thought that in 2025 we would be marching for human rights and for women's rights. So those are some of the things that these protesters are saying at this point. They hope that this is going to make a difference, because there are some folks who are saying, what is this going to do? Is this going to bring about change? And these protesters clearly believe that by speaking, standing up, that they can make a change, at least send their message to the White House, to the Trump administration. For now, live here on Market Street, I'll send it back to you, Brian.
Don, I don't know if you can hear me or not, but does it
Yes.
I mean, I know it's hard to get a sense of this stuff when you're at ground level. Does it seem like there's more people out there today than there were back in June?
It's very hard to tell. As I mentioned, we're on ground level. A chopper would have a better vantage point, but I can tell you, it is definitely thousands of people. I don't know how many thousand, but it is a lot of people. And we're just standing here. And this line, by the way, goes all the way back to the Ferry Building. We're at least 4 blocks back, or 4 blocks in front of the Ferry Building. And then there are more people in front of us. It is hard to tell how this compares to the last No King March back in June, but certainly a lot of people for sure.
Okay. And as far as you've seen, peaceful.
Very peaceful. In fact, before the start of this rally, there was the organizer on top of trucks saying, hey, we do not engage with any counter protesters and we do not cause any vandalism. And he made sure to ask the demonstrators to repeat the same thing. And frankly, if you look at these folks, a lot of seniors, a lot of families, these are not the folks who are out to cause problem. They're out to send a message, not to cause problems. Very, very peaceful thus far.
Okay, Don. By the way, I do have to mention that among the messages are some 4-letter words, and unfortunately, in the course of covering live news events, it's going to show up in the background, and so we apologize for that. There's not a lot we can do about it, but we do try. Appreciate it. Thank you, Dob. And what has to be the second largest gathering in the Bay Area converged at the Lake Merritt Amphitheater in Oakland. Their last rally back in June drew an estimated 10,000 people. Kevin Coe is in Oakland now with a live report on what's happening there. And Kevin, you'd said that it seems like there's more this time.
Yes, and according to organizers, they say the same thing. More than 10,000 according to their rough numbers right now. But Brian, with a crowd like this, Daw was mentioning it. On the ground, we could gauge, but it's really hard to give you exact numbers here. One thing I am sure about is that the crowd here is starting to dwindle down. If you take a live look right behind me, you're going to see it. People are starting to leave Lake Merritt here. This March, it was earlier than the one that took place in San Francisco. The Oakland No Kings rally / march / protest starting at around 11:30 over at Wilma Chan Park. That march lasting about an hour until it came all the way here. The crowd here was massive. This grass I am standing on right now, we couldn't even be here because of how many people that were here shoulder to shoulder. Speaking earlier right behind me was Congresswoman Latifah Simon, who represents Oakland and this part of the Bay Area. Here's a little bit of what she had to say.
The millions of people gathered around the country and the tens of thousands of folks gathered right behind me are American as apple pie. We have a responsibility as Americans to rise up against totalitarianism. We have a responsibility to call truth, and folks want an America where health care is basic, where the rule of law is basic, where we believe not only in our elected leaders, but we believe in our elders and our children. When we call on the President of the United States to support, again, our police departments and fund support to process rape kits and fund violence prevention, he's denied all of those opportunities. He doesn't care about safety. He cares about power.
Of course, Congresswoman Simon taking over for former Congresswoman Barbara Lee, now currently the mayor of Oakland. We also had a chance to talk with her as well. A big topic of conversation here has been the National Guard. That was on the mayor's mind as well.
Well, it's still no National Guard, no occupation of Oakland. We know they try and want to create violence and chaos, but we're a city that prides ourselves on peaceful protest. Our police don't cooperate with ICE. We believe in our First Amendment rights, and we're going to continue to march and speak out.
So, Brian, I could tell you that the crowd, again, is starting to die down, but the streets are still closed by Oakland police. So if anyone was going to be around this way or in this direction, you're still not going to be able to make your way through downtown. But for now, I could tell you there is still a speech happening behind me, but the actual event with the list of different speakers, that is coming to an end here in Oakland.
Okay, Kevin, I'm going to ask you a couple of things, and I just want to let the audience know that there's a bit of a delay between my question and your answer just because of the technology that we're using to get to you live. The first thing is, was there some message that the speakers touched on that really got a reaction from the crowd? Like, what was the topic of some of the speeches?
I mean, the number one thing had to be the idea of no kings, no dictatorship, as this rally is all about. But I do have to say the two main topics we heard over and over again was the National Guard potentially coming into Oakland. As we know, Oakland, a handful of cities that the Trump administration has already mentioned before, making this city really a part of national news. The other aspect that a lot of people not only had signs for, but were speaking out about was the ICE raids that are happening across the Bay Area as well. We actually spoke with a teacher, a local Oakland teacher, an elementary school teacher, who said he's been personally affected. He came out here today because his own students are currently in a world of fear, according to him. So he wanted to be out here to show his own students here in Oakland that they could be strong in this moment.
Okay, it's Kevin Coe live in Oakland, and it looks fairly tranquil behind you as things begin to wind down at Lake Merritt. Kevin, thanks very much. And as we go live to a look again at San Francisco and the tens of thousands of people who are marching up Market Street from the Ferry Building, CBS News Bay Area. In our live coverage of the No Kings protests in the Bay Area, there are about 50 at different locations throughout the Bay. We'll continue when we come back. And welcome back to CBS News Bay Area and our live coverage of the No Kings March. At this point, marchers are finally making their way toward Civic Center Plaza. It has been a 2.3-mile hike from Sue Bierman Park from right across the Ferry Building up Market Street, and they'll begin to pour into Civic Center Plaza, where presumably they will be met with speeches. It's all been a peaceful day, both in San Francisco and in Oakland, and at the 50 other approximately venues throughout the Bay Area where folks gathered from San Jose in the south, where they lined El Camino Real, to Marin County in the north, where in Sausalito they were strung out along Bridgeway, to the Tri-Valley area, where they had folks gathered as well in Walnut Creek and in Pleasanton to express their unhappiness with the present administration, and in some cases that is putting it lightly. There are 2,500 events from coast to coast, hundreds of thousands, probably they estimate, they're expecting, who knows what the real figure is, 4 to 5 million people in all to turn out from New York's Times Square to San Francisco Civic Center Plaza. And it's all because what some would say the left-leaning No Kings organization who organized this is unhappy with Trump and nevertheless not getting a message that is pleasing to conservatives out. And so from that point of view, let's welcome in John Turnicliffe. He is the chair of the Marin GOP, and we're nearing the end of an hour of, let's call it, unhappiness with the Trump administration, with most people out today, presumably hoping that things like Prop 50 passes. John, what is your take, as I guess you're adjusting your screen?
Yeah,
what's your take on where we can see? Can you hear me, John, by the way? John, can you hear me? This is Brian at CBS. We may be having a bit of a problem. Okay, so while we're having a bit of a problem, one thing we've been able to rely on is a video feed from the helicopter over San Francisco, which has been up for a few hours today. Folks began to gather at about noon today before the walk down Market Street. In other states, by the way, while there have been no reports of any violence, other states, however, did take the threat of violence seriously. In Texas, Governor Abbott was said to be deploying the National Guard to Austin, where there were supposed to be some fairly vocal protests, and the same in Kansas. Of course, one of the biggest controversies in California is the suggestion that Trump would set the National Guard into San Francisco. And by the way, Mark Benioff, remember the news last week, was that Mark Benioff, the CEO of Salesforce, had said San Francisco needs the National Guard, something that he walked back until apologizing for the suggestion yesterday. All right, so we'll get back to John Turnicliffe now, the chair of the Marin GOP. And John, I would have to guess that what you're hearing today, well, how would you react to what you're seeing and hearing today from folks who have come out to protest the first 9 months of the Trump administration?
Well, I took it, the way I heard advertised was a No Kings Day or a No Kings Weekend, and that being in protest with Trump, which is interesting being here in Marin, which is, Gavin Newsom's home county, that anybody at the state level in California talking about somebody else being a king, I would bet that King Philip in England doesn't have as much power as Newsom does here, controlling the state legislature in a supermajority, and all the state offices are held by Democrat for the last couple of decades. And then now they're trying to squeeze more juice out of the lemon by getting the remaining seats to this Proposition 50. So I find it kind of ironic that they're calling President Trump a king when they have control, and like I say, more control probably than Prince Philip does in England.
John, the last time that we elected a Republican to national office, to the Senate, was Pete Wilson, I think, back in 1988. This is a state that has had a number of Republican leaders, from Earl Warren, who used to be the district attorney in Oakland, and then went on to be the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, turned out much to Eisenhower's regret. But we've had Duke Majan, we've had Arnold Schwarzenegger, we've had Pete Wilson, but lately the GOP seems to be stuck. As you say, the state has a supermajority of Democrats, meaning that just about everything they want can get pushed through. How are the Republicans ever going to turn that around?
That's a great question, and that's the reason I got involved. I had done nothing. I'd been a kind of a country club Republican for my entire life until after the 2020 election. In 2021, I decided to do something. There are a lot of people doing that too. So there's going to be a change in the Republican Party, I think, going forward. It takes a cycle or two of elections to have that happen. But we're seeing a lot of grassroots people take action. Today we had a phone bank. We didn't do the overpass rally. We did that last weekend and one of the weeknights. We figured we're getting 20 to 30,000 cars going by. So we got some good visibility there, and then phone banking today. So there are people taking action now that had not. I had never been one that had done anything except vote before, maybe send in a few dollars. But there's now grassroots growth in the Republican Party in California that's going to hopefully make that difference going forward.
What is, one of the big things that's going in lockstep with the protest against the administration in general is, in particular, trying to get Prop 50 passed in California. What is your take on Prop 50?
Well, I saw that, the governor had promoted this as against Texas. I think it's even in the ballot description against Texas. But Texas was acting on, so I've not heard anybody talk about this, but I did research on it yesterday. There were over 4 years, 4 or 5 different court decisions that went back and forth with appeal, et cetera. And, the last one was the final one, and the order was they have to redistrict. And the decision was based on race, and I don't know the particulars of it, but they had a court order to redistrict, and they weren't doing anything. And that's what I think President Trump jumped in like a coach in the press box at a game saying, get on the field and do something, guys, because they weren't doing anything. So they took the route of, it looked like least resistance to do 5, because I was hearing people say they should get 8 or 9. So they did what they had to do. And then Newsom used that as the driving force, when I personally think it's his run for president, that he wants to get national exposure as being the anti-Trump candidate.
What do you think, speaking of your suggestion that Newsom, who has said repeatedly that he's not interested in the office, of course, he said that before the 2024 election. What do you think the prospects of Steve Hilton, the Republican candidate for governor, are next year?
Well, he is very visible on Fox, so that is an exposure benefit for him. We see Chad Bianco a few times through Marin, and he's an outstanding candidate too. So I think the Republicans, for a change, instead of wondering who the candidates are be very happy to have a choice in this next election.
Right. I would think for the GOP that the choice would have to expand beyond appearances on Fox and things like that for them to appeal to a blue state like California. I guess we'll see what happens in the course of the next year. This is John Turnicliffe. John, chair of the Marin GOP. Thanks very much for taking some time this Saturday. You bet.
Thank you.
As we look at the forefront of the protesters who are coming up Market Street headed towards Civic Center Plaza to make their feelings known, we'll take a break and wrap things up when we come back. And welcome back to CBS News Bay Area, where we are looking at footage that was taken of protesters in San Francisco that gathered at Sue Bierman Park. This is live footage of those protesters who began their march today at about noon from the Ferry Building, headed up Market Street Last time they gathered, there were 140,000 protesters in San Francisco. Don't have any idea of numbers, but they do appear to be large both here and in Oakland. Or at Lake Merritt, about 10,000 people gathered to hear Mayor Barbara Lee talk about the fact that she no dice to ice and speeches that went along those lines, as well as protesting what they consider to be the authoritarian rule of Donald Trump. And 9 months into his office, this is the third national mobilization of protesters from coast to coast, the second under the umbrella of the No Kings protests. From New York, where they began in Times Square this morning and spread across the country into the nation's capital, and this time in many of the smaller towns around the United States. Organizers expected about 2,500 different cities and towns had organizations put together, groups of people, to voice their unhappiness with the Trump administration. In some cases in Texas, the National Guard was at least suggested to be coming out to Austin under the auspices of Governor Abbott, who is worried about potential violence, and also in Kansas. Protest organizers say the gatherings challenge Trump authoritarianism. The president thinks his rule is absolute, said the No Kings organizers on their website. Folks who are against it, including, of course, Trump himself, said, "They're referring to me as a king. I am not a king." President Trump, for his part, is spending the day today at his home in Mar-a-Lago, where tonight he will sit down with a group of supporters who would pretty much have to be millionaires, because the ticket to the fundraiser at Mar-a-Lago tonight is $1 million a plate. Folks who are out to protest today were characterized as being everyone from ordinary people, electricians and plumbers, and folks perhaps like you who are watching this broadcast who just decided to get out and make their feelings known. And as they all protest, at least what they characterize as no kings, at least there was also no violence. None reported at this hour, at least on the West Coast, as everything, despite the millions of people turning out, perhaps 5 million from coast to coast this time, there have been no reports of violence. And things in San Francisco as well, where everyone now will begin to file into Civic Center Plaza for a late afternoon event of speech making, has so far been peaceful. And so to that extent, it's been great. Some of the signs, again, I just want to reiterate that the protesters were carrying did have bad language on them. And we unfortunately caught some of that and apologize for it in the press of covering live news. That is going to happen during protests. Dial in has been live in San Francisco. Kevin Coe over in Oakland. I'm Brian Hackney back at the studios in San Francisco tonight. At 5 o'clock, we'll have the latest news and a wrap of everything from coast to coast. CBS Weekend News will be on at 5:30 tonight over on the broadcast side. We'll also see you at 6 and 11. For now, from CBS in San Francisco, I'm Brian Hackney. Appreciate your watching as we finish out live.